Guess he's not working for the state.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am the acting chair of the Northborough Appropriations Committee. My name is Richard Never. This open meeting of the Appropriations Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order on March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the town of Northborough has been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of the Appropriations Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely, along with all staff and guests that will be invited in later. The order allows the Appropriations Committee to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to the Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. And now I will confirm the members of the Appropriations Committee in attendance tonight. Please say aye when I call your name. George Brinkle.
Aye.
Bob D'Amico.
Aye.
Janice Height.
Aye.
Anthony Petit.
Aye.
Myself, acting chair, aye. And our chair lady, Elaine Kelly, is absent this evening. And we also have our town administrator, John Kadir.
Present.
Okay, the chair confirmed that all the board members and persons anticipated on the agenda are remotely present, can be heard by stating, I'm sorry, I didn't have to read that. Let's see, all right. Staff, when I call, I did that also. John Kadir is the only one on staff that will be with us tonight. But having said that, have I missed anyone?
Nope.
All right. First item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of March 4th, 2020, and we will be postponing the vote to approve these minutes until our next meeting. So we'll jump right to our second agenda item, which is a senior center budget presentation. And this will be given to us by Liz Tradiak, the senior center director.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have a Jim Hogan in the waiting room?
Unknown to me.
No.
Okay.
The library trustee.
Oh. Okay.
Well, Liz, are you with us?
Yes, okay to proceed?
Yes, if you'd like to start your presentation.
Sure thing. First, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing here up at the Senior Center. But first, the budget. For this fiscal year 22, we have a level service budget with only some very minor adjustments from the previous year. The budget is up just about 3.5%, a majority of which is a $5,177 increase in our utility line, just to more accurately reflect what our actual utility costs are up here at the Senior Center. The other portion of the slight increase includes the contractual wage increases for union and non-union personnel. And you might notice there is also a slight decrease in our contractual services due to consolidating some services that were being provided up here and switching to a new database system for tracking our programs and our participants and our outreach notes. And it was designed specifically for senior centers. So we did make some minor adjustments. If that is pretty much all I have for the numbers, but if you would indulge me, I'd love to tell you what we've been doing up here.
There's
In
no
general-
objection? Anyone have any objections? Raise your hand.
No.
Seeing none, please continue.
Okay. Just in,
I
yes.
haven't had the chance to meet her in public, either as patrons or as members of the committee. Could she tell us a little bit about herself? You know, education, how long her commute is. I don't want to know where it is. I just want to know how long it is.
sure. Thank you. I started here, actually I was interviewing this time last year, so I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary in April. Prior to working here, I worked at the town of Littleton as their Elder and Human Services Director. Prior to that, I spent almost 10 years in different management roles and ending up as Director of Client Services at Bay Path Elder Services, which is our local aging services access point. I have a master's degree in clinical art therapy and counseling with a concentration in dementia and Alzheimer's care. And I live 2.9 miles down the road, just over the line in Berlin.
That's a big selling point for getting her to come here.
Well, we had some problems with commute times not too
Oh.
long ago.
If I was a little healthier, I could probably bike here or run here, but that's a goal for the future.
Wait for better weather.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
When
So-
do you- Go ahead, excuse me.
Okay.
John, when do you expect the senior center to open again?
I'll let Liz field that question. We had that conversation this afternoon, so why don't you respond to that, Liz, please?
Sure. I would love for the senior center to open as soon as possible. I'm keeping track of what our state agency, the Massachusetts Council on Aging organization, is giving for guidance. We're planning our grand welcome back celebration. We're just trying to get all of these 65 plus vaccinated and come up with a fair and equal way to have people come into the building whether or not they've had access to the vaccine yet. So it's in the works.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we go on with the presentation? Okay, seeing none, you may please continue the presentation.
Sure. Well, thank you. I think it's hard to put human services and social work in general into numbers and dollar signs. I think it's really hard to quantify this type of work. We do have one of the smaller budgets here in town, but I really do think our impact is community-wide is pretty great. If this were normal times, I assume or imagine I would be here reciting the increase in our program statistics and how many new participants we have, but this has been, anything except normal here for the past year. So there are some things that I can quantify that I really would like to share with you and highlight. And I'll start with our transportation program because that has been running, up and running. So far, since the fiscal year started in July, we've provided 1,600 trips. This is bringing seniors and adult disabled residents to their medical appointments, the grocery store, the pharmacy, their vaccination appointments. We're still getting people where they need to go despite the pandemic. All 4 of our van drivers that we currently have recently, this past week and the week before, all got trained on dementia care for when they're transporting someone who has dementia. And they all did this. It was an optional training and they still opted in to do it. So I think that really shows the commitment of our drivers here, that we're all really committed to making life a little easier in Northborough, a little more age-friendly for everyone. In terms of outreach, we've been busier than ever here. We've provided over 600 instances of individualized one-on-one outreach support for our residents, including caregivers who might be adult children who are supporting their family members who are here in Northborough, but they live across the country. Our outreach worker, Jocelyn, who is incredible, has been helping with food stamp applications, now known as SNAP, fuel assistance applications, housing applications, setting up in-home care. And that's just to name a few of the things that she does on her regular day-to-day basis. We've also counseled nearly 300 people on their health insurance options through our Volunteer Shine program so far this fiscal year. In addition to the ongoing outreach that we have, we're still continuing to provide all the social opportunities for engagement with residents. So just since July, we've had just over 3,000 check-ins to our virtual programs and our outdoor programs. And that's despite your technology troubles, the bad weather, the ongoing pandemic. People are still meeting and they're still eager to see each other, even if it's across a computer screen. And I think 3,000 check-ins is pretty impressive for this group of folks. With the pandemic ongoing, that added a whole new layer to the outreach that we do here. We're kind of jokingly calling it our enhanced outreach. So last April, at the very start of this all, we made just about 3,000 calls to all the seniors in town who we could find a phone number for, just to check in, to offer support, provide information. And then we established an ongoing program to check in with our most vulnerable residents. And those are people who either have like a sparse support system in place, or people who just self-identified as someone who just wants someone to check in on them regularly. And we're still making those phone calls to this day. Then again, in the fall, we made another round of outreach calls to all of our residents who are over 80 and to our vulnerable residents again, to check in on them after the lull of the summer and as numbers were creeping up again. And then just a couple of weeks ago, we made another round of calls. We did make 600 phone calls in a week and a half to all of our residents over 75, everyone we could pin down a phone number for, just to check in on their ability to access the vaccine. And from those 600 calls, we got 70 residents hooked up to a vaccination clinic. So these were people who may have otherwise kind of slipped through the cracks as we're rolling through the new phases. I think people might be getting sick of hearing from us at this point. I'm not sure if we'll continue making these calls, but we'll see. But in terms of the COVID clinic here, that has just been so incredible. And it's really heartbreaking that we're kind of winding down on that. It's been so nice to see people in the building and see their faces and meet people. And having it here, we have the ability to check in on people while they're in the observation room. We can call them the following Monday to see how they're doing. We can remind them personally of their second appointments. It's just so nice to have it here in the building. When the state actually opened up the wave of 65 plus eligibility, we had so many incoming calls that our phone system just completely jammed up. We had to call a service technician to come out and David Kane from IT to come out to try to fix our phone system. That's how desperate people were to get this vaccine, and still are. And they just really want to talk to a live person and have someone help walk them through the process, because not everyone is tech savvy. So that was most of the things that I can quantify. There's other like stories and anecdotes that I would love to share with you. I have hundreds of them that I would love to highlight. I'll just mention a few of them to really drive home what it is that we are doing up here. So here's just a few anecdotes I wanted to share. So we've coordinated with community contact tracers to deliver groceries and cleaning supplies to families that have been affected by COVID and either financially can't afford the groceries or the cleaning supplies, or don't have the technology skills to order them online for themselves. Well, while we were making all of those community-wide outreach calls, we discovered a lot of people who were coping with grief and loss and these big, heavy emotions, and we were able to connect them with the appropriate support group or connect them with a friendly check-in program. We have a couple different versions of a friendly check-in here at the senior center. We've partnered a lot with many different community organizations here in town. And just recently we did one with the Community Affairs Committee where students made Valentines, and we're still getting phone calls even this week of people just saying how much they loved receiving a handwritten Valentine from somebody, a child in town. We also delivered buckets of sand and ice melt product to seniors in town, and that was in collaboration with the Rotary Club. Just to make it safer for them to get in and out of their house, prevent falls, and make sure that they have access to their essential services, like the fire department can get up the front steps and Meals on Wheels can still be delivered despite the ice. We are still continuing on with partnering with the Algonquin Community Action Program, which is high school students who do these community service projects, and just about monthly, they put together these takeaway bags of either goodies or crafts or some sort of project. And we're still doing that throughout the pandemic. And we're really trying to keep that intergenerational connection intact, despite the distance that we need to keep from each other in these age groups. So I could go on and share 100 more stories, but I won't take up all of your evening here. The team up here and all the volunteers that have stepped up have just been fantastic, and I want to say it's incredible to work here, and I really do enjoy it. And I'll take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? I had one as you were speaking. I happened to see one of your vans going by today on their shopping trip, I believe, up to Target. And with the COVID distancing required, I don't know how you set it up in the vans, but have you had any problem, or did anyone have to be ever turned away because you couldn't fit enough people into the van to go on one of these trips?
Yep. So right at the over the summer, the WRTAs, which is our partner in our transportation program, they outfitted all of our buses with plexiglass shields. So the driver is essentially in like a plexiglass box, and we're only doing one passenger at a time. So one passenger will sit in the back and the driver will be in the front. The scheduler screens every person who tries to book a ride. We have had to decline a couple people who were looking to be transported home from the hospital being COVID positive, but we put them in contact with ambulance service and the discharge planner at their hospital to follow up with that. Otherwise, it's been very successful. If there is an overflow of people who need transportation at the same time, the WRTA does have a grant, a COVID-related grant that they can put people on a taxi funded through their new grant. So we don't turn anyone away unless they're COVID positive.
Okay. Do we have any other comments from anyone? Questions? John?
Yeah, if I just may, I just want to say Liz and her staff have done an absolutely amazing job throughout this COVID pandemic situation. The outreach is outreach on steroids. Literally every senior has gotten called at least once, but some 3 times minimally, and then, followed up as needed after that. So, it's tough doing online. People want physical interaction, and ultimately we can't wait to get back to that scenario. I just wanted to mention also, in terms of the transportation program, we have a contract with the WRTA. So the WRTA, Worcester Regional Transportation Authority, pays for the vans, pays for the drivers, and pays an administrative overhead to the town of Northborough. And we are the hub for for Boylston, Westboro, and Northborough for transportation. And so that's out of our facility, and it's great because we get amazing service, and it's at no local cost. So there's no general fund expenses going towards that. In fact, the senior center brings in a little bit of money as the host agency for that that they can use on other programming. The only other thing I would mention is right now with the closure and the closure of the senior center was at the direction of the governor. So we could not be open even if we wanted to be open. But when we closed, we did temporarily have to separate some staff in the bistro. This is our meals program, our in-house meals program, and there was a part-time position. Those were all funded, again, no tax dollars. They were funded out of program revenues. And that's a model that we used, the rec department uses that model. But unfortunately with no programs comes no revenue. And so we've had to temporarily lose those folks. But the intent is there are 3 full-time people at the senior center that are funded through the general fund. And then there's another 3.13 folks that are funded through either through the WRTA contract, the van drivers, or through our program revenue. So once the building gets opened again and we can open the meals program again, the intent is to bring that staffing back and to get those programs going again. It's tough that the folks want to come back. We want to have them back as soon as we can do that safely. That is the intention. So, but again, I just can't say enough about the outreach. Any senior that wants to receive the newsletter can do so. And the last comment that I would make, which has all the programming, the last comment I would make is if anybody either watching or participating in this meeting is aware of a senior that needs assistance, please have them reach out on their behalf to the senior center. One of the nice things about a town like Northborough is that we have the resources and the capacity to help anybody who needs it. Nobody should be struggling with food insecurity. Nobody should be struggling because they can't get transportation somewhere, and nobody should be struggling because of social isolation. So those are all things that we're here to help with. And the senior center does an excellent job of it. And so please reach out and encourage people to call on their behalf. And Liz's folks will be happy to do the outreach and make that connection. The goal is to get people connected and get them involved, and to keep them connected and involved. That we've learned especially through this pandemic, that isolation is tough on everybody, and the less connected you are, the harder time you're going to have with it. So even if it's virtual for the time being, we can help with that connection, and nobody should hesitate to make that phone call.
Yes, Tony. You're on mute, Tony. There you go.
Thank you. So this would be for Liz or John. When the senior center reopens, and there's an intention to bring back workers who were laid off, are there funds that will be required to pay them before the revenue stream starts coming in?
That's an excellent question, Tony. And we have a fund balance in the senior center revolving fund. We'll be able to get right up and running right out of the way. In fact, we can operate at a deficit for a good amount of time to let the programs get up and going again. Again, that's the same. We had that conversation this afternoon, Liz and I. So
Good, thank you.
Yep. And again, no tax dollars needed.
Well, that's great too, but I mean, yeah, we have to take this kind of thing into account.
Yep.
Any other comments? But before Liz goes, I'd just like to thank her on my behalf and the committee's behalf. I'm sure we are all impressed and thankful for your service so far, and hope you stay with us for quite a while to come.
Thank you. I plan to.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks, John.
Okay, so we will release Liz at this time. And our next presentation will be on the library budget. And this will be from Jen Bruneau, the library director.
Yep. We also, Mr. Chairman, if I may, we've got
Yes.
a couple of members of the library trustees. If you would like to invite them into the meeting at this point, in case they have some comments. We have Michelle
Yes.
Rehill and Jim Hogan.
Could you repeat the names, please?
Michelle Rehill and Jim Hogan are here.
Right.
Jim and Michelle, if you want to turn your video on. welcome.
Thank you very much.
I can't see myself because I pressed the 3 dots that Jim told me to press before.
We can see you, so
We can see you, you just can't see yourself.
Am I actually on the camera? I don't know.
yes.
Okay, good.
Wow, Liz's presentation was amazing. I don't know if I want to follow that.
Maybe you want,
Let me,
excuse me, yeah, maybe you want to start with telling us a little bit about yourself.
yes, and thank you for having me tonight. So I started, I believe it was in November. So I've just been here for a couple of months, but for 10 years prior to this, I was just up the street at the Boylston Library. Prior to that, I was living in North Carolina, working at a large city library that was part of an 8-branch system. So, but I was born and raised in Connecticut. I love the South, but you know, New England is my home. So it was time for me to come back up. I loved working in Boylston, but I'm really so excited to be here and part of the Northborough team. What else can I tell you about myself? I have a 3.5-year-old daughter who keeps me from sleeping most nights. And I coach high school soccer in my spare time. So let me tell you a little bit about the library and what we've been up to. A little bit about the budget. The request is for a about 2.4% increase, which is about $20,000, just a little over. In addition to the wage increases, largely this number reflects a restoration of our materials budget, which was cut last year. It is offset. We were able to reduce some of our other expenses that we just didn't need. So part of the 30,000 in materials is offset by reductions elsewhere. Let's see. While the library has been closed for the pandemic, well, closed to the public, I don't want to say completely closed because we've been so busy. Our curbside service we've circulated about 47,000 items using our curbside service, which represents, it's hard to get an exact number of individual patrons who have been using our service, but it is several hundred. And we have a library on the go program, which will actually bring materials to somebody's house if you're unable to make it to the library for any reason. It could be because you're in quarantine or you're sick, or it could just be because you don't have transportation. All anybody has to do is just call the library and we can get you set up with that. That has been a really invaluable service to people during the pandemic, and is something that we plan to continue doing even post-COVID when the world goes back to normal. We have seen a pretty sizable increase in our Overdrive collection, which is our ebooks, e-magazines. We have downloadable audio, and there's some films on there as well. So we've increased our purchasing for that collection to kind of what was happening, especially during the pandemic, is, you know, if you wanted the newest John Grisham book and you wanted it as an ebook, because all the libraries across Massachusetts were closed, you'd put yourself on the hold list and you'd be about, 600 in line for the book. So what we started doing was purchasing Overdrive Advantage titles, which are just for Northborough residents. So you might see, the whole line might be 600 people, but if Northborough has that title, then you have priority for that one. So it's been really cutting down on the wait times for people, because I think while everybody's been home, it's been really important for people to still be able to get reading materials for their stress levels, for their mental health, for educational purposes, for anything that they're kind of looking at doing. I mean, everybody's spending more time at home, So for example, we have video games, we have movies, we have music. So we've really been able to provide a really good resource for people for some of those stress relieving entertainment, as well as, everybody is suddenly a homeschooling parent. So I don't know if everybody was super ready for virtual schooling. So we've been providing additional resources for kids and for parents as well. We have done very close to 500 programs in the last year. Most of those have been virtual. Our children's department has been wonderful. They moved every single story time that they had right onto Zoom almost immediately. So they were offering, it was 3 story times a week plus some other additional programming. They moved everything online. They haven't downsized any of that. And we've had about 11,500 people participate in those programs this year, which I think kind of speaks to their desire to connect with their neighbors, especially kids, particularly those who were not in school, so they're not getting interactions with other kids elsewhere. So the school age kids, they're still seeing each other on Zoom in school, but preschool and toddler age, they're still able to get some sort of connection and interaction with kids their age, even though, most of them are home. So it's really cute to watch too. The kids are really fun. When it was warmer, we were able to do pop-up outdoor programming, and we were able to drag some materials outside so that people could browse, because that is one of the things that is really difficult to replicate when the doors are closed. So we had little pop-up libraries where we would bring out the newest, most exciting materials. People could, from a safe, just sort of line up and browse what we've got. Our children's department did some outdoor programming, so everybody had their own socially distanced little square of lawn, and they were doing some exercises and dancing and singing, so as connected as they can be while still staying safe. One of the things that I think has been the most impactful is that we were able to add 7 mobile hotspots to our collection so patrons can check them out. And what they do is they provide a wireless signal so that you can use the internet in places either where maybe your home does not have adequate service for all of the devices that are suddenly connected all the time, or for patrons who just don't have internet at all. Right away, as soon as those were processed, we were able to give one to the cable access channel so that they were able to go to the hockey rink and live stream the high school hockey games, which was something, so you may know parents were not allowed, there were no spectators allowed at any sporting events. So they were able to, with one of these hotspots, create a mobile wireless signal so that parents could actually watch their kids playing. And for parents who have seniors, that was really important and really kind of a fun thing that we were able to provide for them so they can actually see their kids play, because some of them may not play next year. So for their last season, it was really nice to be able to provide something so the parents didn't miss that experience. We also had a woman who borrowed a hotspot who is taking college courses, who had been laid off from her job. So she was living with her sister who has 3 young children. So she said she had been hiding in the basement trying to study because there's a lot of noise going on, a lot of activity in the house all the time. So she said, I'm hiding in the corner of the basement so that it's quiet, but the internet doesn't really reach there. So we were able to give her a hotspot to enable her to study a little bit easier. So on nice days, she can go outside and get out of that basement. one of the things that the Adult Services Department has been doing, they created the Northborough Job Seekers Program, since a lot of people, unfortunately, had been laid off during the pandemic. And a lot of the people who they were helping had been out of the job searching process for a number of years, and things have changed. Things are online a lot more than they used to be. So people were having a difficult time writing resumes, job searching, interviewing on Zoom, which, having been through that process, I can tell you it's a lot different than doing it in person. So we were able to bring in speakers that provide tips for networking, for interviewing, for searching for jobs, and making those connections so that you can get a job, even in a pandemic, which is a really unique experience, I should say. We are, I know everybody, the $1 million question. We are actively working towards reopening. I don't have a date in mind because we want to just sort of make sure that everything is ready and that it's advisable. So we're kind of looking at what our neighbors are doing, what other libraries are doing. Some libraries in Massachusetts have reopened. So I've been having conversations with other directors about what their procedures are, what are the challenges that they're facing being open, and other things like that. So right now what we're doing is making some changes to the interior space so that when people come in, they can have an easier time staying socially distanced. We're looking at getting some self-checkout stations so that people don't have to interact with the circulation department quite so much. We did get plexiglass put up so that, you know, just as a physical barrier to kind of protect our staff even further. So we are really looking forward to the day that we can reopen for browsing, for computer appointments, for some of those things that are really difficult to replicate without the doors being open. Does anybody have any questions?
Anyone have any questions or comments?
How long is your commute?
Right now, it is about 45 minutes. I do drive through Worcester on my way in. The last year, I have to tell you, has been wonderful. There hasn't really been any traffic. I expect that it'll be closer to an hour when things start to really open up.
Okay.
Yes, George.
I was looking at the changes in the budget, and you know, there was a decrease in utilities and a couple of the things that kind of make sense if the building's closed, but if you're looking to reopen the building, won't those tend to go back up, or?
We did look at that. Some of the changes that you'll see reflect right before the pandemic, we had added Thursday hours. So some of those numbers had gone up because we had expanded the number of hours that were open.
Okay.
For right now, that's not really on the table for right now. So we hope to get back to that, but
Not opening quite as long hours as it was before. Okay.
Right.
All right. I was just wondering,
Actually,
you know, building utility use should go up and things like that. So
yeah. Actually, if I can, through the chair, we're at the same hours we were before the pandemic. Just before the pandemic, we were going to expand hours. So now we're just back to where we are, and I'll work with the friends and the trustees to see what we can do moving forward. But in this, that's why the slight reduction. It's over what we were going to do. But the hours are the same as they've been for the last decade. So we're trying to add some more hours in on Thursday night, and that's something we're going to have some conversations about over the course of the year.
okay.
Yes, Janice.
I was library trustee for 20 years, 12 of those as chairman, during the time that the first edition was built. And it was time consuming. usually go to the library about 5 times a week because I'm an omnivorous reader and I like to browse. So I'm, not happy particularly with COVID. I wish you well.
I can tell you from the staff perspective, it's really taken a toll on us because we all, we get into this profession in part because we love helping people. And so as much as everybody misses the library, we miss our patrons too. So we really can't wait until the doors are open and I can meet people in person instead of, just seeing faces on the Hollywood Squares Zoom screen.
I had a couple of questions. I know you had a nice computer room down there with computers and printers and whatever. Is this being exercised in any way? I know printers will gunk up and computers need their software continually updated. Is someone taking care of this so it's always, they don't die on us?
Yep, we're keeping everything updated and running.
Okay, and I've also noticed there's various community groups on the internet in town, and I see a lot of new people coming into town. For those that would like to check out a book or a tape or whatever, that don't have a library card, what do they do?
So right now, if anybody wanted to get a library card that doesn't currently have one, they could call us, and basically we're taking information over the phone, and then you can come and pick up your card, similar to the process with curbside. So once the card is issued, they could then request books and pick them up at the same time as their library card.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? John.
Just a couple of comments. One is I'm just pleased that, as you know, in the last fiscal 21 budget, due to the impacts of COVID, there were a lot of cuts that were made across the board. I'm just pleased in this budget. Jen's advocacy for the library was very strong during the budget process, and her top priority was get the book and materials budget restored. So that is back 100%. The library, to some extent, has been restored more fully than some of the other departments in anticipation of getting back open again. And the other comment that I would just make is how pleased I am and the management team is to have Jen. I have to tell you, Jen has really gone out of her way to insert herself in a collaborative way in the management team. And she's working with the DPW director right now on the improvements over at the library. She's gone out of her way to make sure the coordination with my office has been excellent, working with the other departments. I know there's been some talk between, the recreation and the senior center and working to collaborate on some programs. It's just, it's nice. I feel like the library has really come back into the fold with the larger organization, and everybody is just really happy and pleased with Jen as a director. And I think things have gone very well in the last 5 years. I just want to say, as the town administrator, I appreciate her efforts in getting those relationships into a really good place, and just moving forward, building on those. So I think everybody on the team, I've heard nothing but positive things, and it's important for the trustees to hear that the staff seems to be happy, and her coworkers and the other department heads are really happy to work with her. And I know she's been great. The coordination with my office has never been better. So we're just glad Jen's here, and she's just chomping at the bit to get the place open so she can do what they want to do more than anything, which is serve the residents. So thank you.
I know we can't beat what John has said, but I know we do appreciate your budget and your presentation, and especially all the work that you have done during this crisis that we've had. So thank you for that.
And thank you for having me.
And with that, if there's no other comments or questions, I'll release Jen at this time. She's welcome to stay on. Is there anyone else in the library that would like to make a statement at this time or say anything?
Just thank you for your support of the library's budget and all the hard work that you do to make sure that we keep the town fiscally sound.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're very pleased with Jen as well, and I'm very happy to hear the comments that John had to make. very, very pleased. We want to be part of the town solution as we move forward and work with the town in every way possible to bring us back to where we should be when this pandemic is over. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Great.
All right, we will release the library personnel and they're free to stay on here, but we have nothing else from them this evening. And we can move on to the next agenda item, which is our solid waste, water and sewer enterprise funds, which I believe will be presented to us by Scott Charpentier. Is Scott with us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you see me?
Yes,
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you. So we're going to divert a little bit from the agenda, and we're going to postpone solid waste. John, I'm not sure when we want to cover solid waste.
We're going to circle back with solid waste on probably a meeting on April 1st. We've had quite a bit of work on the Water Enterprise Fund, which Scott's going to get into now. That's taken up a bit of our time as of late.
Thank you, John. So I'm going to start out with the Water Enterprise Fund. You have before you our proposed FY22 budget. There are minimal changes throughout that are not specifically related to contractual labor increases. There are a couple utility increases, but the number one item you'll see on the budget is the MWRA assessment. So we purchase all of our water from the MWRA and then sell it to our customers, the residents. The MWRA operates very similar to our water department in that they're an enterprise fund. They have they base their assessments, which are the water bills, on usage of their member communities, and that usage is based on the percentage of their overall sales. So the MWRA sells a bulk amount of water, and those who use a higher percentage of that pay an appropriate and a portioned percentage of their operating costs. So through the pandemic, there has been a substantial shift in the MWRA's water customers' use. As you know, some of the larger communities that are business-based were shut down for the majority of the year. Some of the smaller communities and the bedroom communities, such as Northborough and Southborough, we were less impacted by the statewide shutdown. That shift in water use is reflected in our substantial rate increase, or our assessment increase. The MWRA is providing us a preliminary assessment increase of 24.3% over what it was last year, which is $345,583. That's a substantial increase, one like we've never seen before. To put in perspective, the city of Boston, they used over almost 4% less water than they did in prior years, and that reduces their amount of assessment that they're apportioned from the MWRA, and thus our percentage use goes up. It's a one-time occurrence. I don't see that happening with the reopening process going forward in calendar 21. But again, the MWRA operates very similar to we do. They bill us on what we use. So when everybody in town gets their water bill, it's not for the coming year, it's for the past quarter of their water use. The MWRA operates the same way. So our overall budget increase for proposed budget increase for FY22 is $360,705. That represents a 13.9% increase with a proposed budget of $2,961,675. Of the $360,705 increase this year, 96% of it is attributed solely to the MWRA assessment. They're raising our assessment by over $345,000. There are standards in the industry that for enterprise funds, specifically utilities, relevant to what we're supposed to retain for a fund balance. The fund balance is our savings account. We use that for purchases. We use that to address emergency needs. We use that for things like this. one-time occurrences that prove to be problematic from an operating budget perspective, but again, are one-time occurrences. So what you'll see in our proposed budget annual narrative is that we're proposing to allocate $316,548 out of our retained earnings, out of our fund balance, to ease the rate increase burden on our customers for this coming fiscal year. We're proposing a typical rate increase between 5% and 6%. We'll do a full rate study near the end of the fiscal year to capture exactly what our revenues are. But again, our assessment from the MWRA is going up over $345,000, and we're going to pay $316,000 of our operating budget increase out of our fund balance. So the industry standard is to maintain somewhere between 10 and 25% of your operating budget as fund balance to address emergencies like this, or large infrastructure failures, or capital purchases. We typically operate in that 15 to 20% range for our fund balance. By diverting this fund balance toward our operating budget, we'll still be in the industry standard range of 10 to 25%. We'll be at a little over 10%. It's 10.7%. The expectation in fiscal year 21 is that our revenues are going to be up. So I started by explaining that bedroom communities like ours used more water because people were home. Large business based communities use less water because the businesses were closed. Well, they use less, we've used more. The expectation is that our revenue projections will be exceeded at the end of the fiscal year. So once the end of the fiscal year's finances are certified, the expectation and projection is that funds will be put back into the fund balance. The additional revenue will be put back in, and a conservative projection is that our fund balance will go from 10.7 up to the 17 to 20% range after the FY21 revenues are certified. So again, the water fund had some challenges, this fiscal year, it took us a little while to work through what normally is an operating budget where you're proposing something of 3 to 4% increase, and coming up with revenue projections that are accurate, assessment projections that are accurate and well thought out, and a financial plan and model that meets the requirements of maintaining fund balance without overburdening our ratepayers with a substantial increase that will likely not be warranted in the years to come. Other components of the, I'm sorry, John, other components of the budget you see is we're providing a $32,000 use of fund balance for capital expenditure. It's a utility tractor. We'll discuss that a little more on the sewer side. But that's the proposed operating budget. I don't really have any wonderful stories like the senior center director or the library director about the.
Everybody can keep flushing. So you got that going for you.
Right.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just two comments. This budget was completed when Scott was on your agenda at a previous meeting. The budget was done, and we were projecting a typical MWRA rate increase of 5%, which is what we would normally anticipate. We were ready to go, and I think it was probably about 3 hours before your meeting, and he was due to present that rate came rolling across his desk. And after I picked him up off the floor, I said, we'll postpone this for another meeting. We need to find a solution. And for us, the solution that Scott is proposing, and I 100% agree with it, is it's a one-time bizarre thing that's happened. And so we're going to use some of our financial reserves to mitigate the impact. Because as he said, we don't anticipate this being a trend next year. Things are going to go back to normal. The best analogy I can give you is the high school, which you're used to talking about, right? So the high school, we get assessed with, it's a regional high school, it's Northborough, Southborough. So the budget goes up, 3%, and we get our assessments. But the assessments don't necessarily go up 3%, right? Because if Southborough sends less kids and we send more kids, our share of the budget goes up and our assessment goes up. On a global scale, that's exactly what Scott's talking about here is these big users, their uses went down, and the small users like us went up. Southborough had a 20-something% increase from the MWA as well for the same reason. Our people are home, we're using more water, and the industrial areas are using less. So, so it's a one-time hit that's happening because of COVID. And so the anticipation is that our revenues at the end of this year will be higher than we originally forecast. And then the next cycle through, we're going to see things bounce back out. And on a relative basis, those other big heavy users, their use will go up and our share will go back down, and we'll see a much more normal, reasonable increase next year. But this is, I don't know if you've been reading the paper, but some of the, there's been a lot of enterprise funds out there, a couple communities along Route 9 on the way into Boston that have had multi-million-dollar shortfalls or issues with their enterprise funds because people aren't using water anymore. You know, we just that we're on the other end of the spectrum. So it's a unanticipated blip. This is why you have financial reserves as a community, and as an enterprise fund on a smaller scale, they have their own financial reserves to deal with things like this. So the idea is the budget's going up 13%. The rates aren't going to go up 13%. The rates are going to go up a typical increase, and we're going to mitigate it this year. And then next year, we'll get back on a normal schedule again, is what we're anticipating. So it's been some scrambling to put this one together. Scott's done a great job staying on top of this, but we literally got the news like a couple of hours before he was supposed to present the budget a couple of weeks ago. So we've had to take a little extra time to work out a scenario that we can get by this year that's financially sound, and we'll regroup and see where we are in the next cycle.
Any questions or comments from anyone? Yes, Janice.
This is just an informational question. Do we still maintain the town wells even though we can't use them?
The town wells are in inactive standby status with the Mass DEP. They are available for use in the event of an emergency, but they have not been exercised. We have not prepared a standard operating procedure for keeping them available for use. One of the challenges with keeping drinking water wells available for immediate use is chemical storage. Chemicals degrade over time. Their containment mechanisms degrade over time, as the chairman was speaking about computers and printers. That's like that on a Goliath scale. We did submit a preliminary letter of interest to the MVP, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program, for consideration of reactivating the Lyman Street well as a possible secondary finished water supply source for our neighboring community of Westboro. That provides us a couple benefits. One, it keeps our well up, active, used, exercised, and ready in the event there's emergency. And also it's a good revenue stream. And it assists in a regional drought management program. So we're actually have a meeting scheduled in 2 weeks with the state to discuss the viability of that project. But to answer your question directly, Janice, the wells are available, but they are 72 hours from up and running.
It's not bad.
Nope.
Scott, just if I may, Mr. Chairman, just because I want that statement is going to confuse people that we can't use the well, but we can sell the water to Westboro. Can you explain the chemical incompatibility issue that we're facing? Why that scenario works, but we can't use the water, but Westboro can, due to the source?
Before I came to Northborough, and before the town was on full MWRA water supply, there was a water chemistry issue. Anytime you mix a surface water supply, the MWRA, water comes from the Quabbin, goes to the Wachusett, comes to us through the Carroll treatment plant. Anytime you mix a surface water supply with a groundwater supply, you have a water chemistry problem. Our groundwater in Massachusetts is acidic. It has a very low pH. It has a lot of minerals in it. We are rich in iron and manganese. And when you mix those two water supplies in a drinking water pipe, in that mixing zone, you have really problematic discoloration and sedimentation. So mixing those two is not something that any community can do successfully. Westboro, on the other hand, they pump out of the ground right on the other side of 135 and Lyman Street from us.
Right.
It is right there. It's over the railroad bridge. They need water. It's a good regional approach to drought management. And for us, outside of the revenue source, it would provide us a well that's exercised, active, and that would take that 72-hour response time and turn that into 3 hours out of Lyman Street in a matter of turning a valve.
Any
Thank you,
other
Scott.
questions? Tony? You're muted, Tony.
Yep. So for John, John mentioned the possibility of a normal rate increase next year, but after this tremendous shift, I don't see, why would there be a rate increase next year from NWRA?
I would expect next year, as the city of Boston and other larger industrial and business communities, as their water use goes up back to normal, their percentage of the MWRA's total will go up. Therefore, even if our water use stays the same, our percentage will go down. And as our percentage goes down, so does the percentage of their operating costs that we pay. So my expectation is that our assessment will go down next year. My rate model that we prepare with our consultant, projects out revenue and expenses and capital projects out for 5 years looking forward. I have included in that rate model minor increases to the MWRA, but my expectation is that they're not going to be seen. My expectation is next year our percentage of the overall use will be lower than it is this year, and as such, our assessment will go down. Their operating expenses are like ours; they go up 3 to 4% a year.
Mhm.
And if we stay level compared to Boston, our assessment goes up 3 to 4%. They go up 3 or 4% next year, and Boston gets back to normal. I can't see us staying where we are. Just the math just doesn't work.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? No other questions or comments? I thank Scott for his presentation, and very concise and well thought out as usual. And at this time, we can release Scott from this meeting.
But
Unless,
we actually, Scott's gonna go through the sewer enterprise fund next.
sorry.
That's okay.
Less than
I'm
exciting.
sure he'd love to sneak out, but we can't let him off the hook that easily.
I think coming back for a third time will be enough. You don't want to see me 4 times. So the sewer enterprise fund this year, we're proposing a 3.4% or $77,166 increase over last year's operating budget, for a proposed operating budget of $2,373,460. The largest variable and largest single line item in the budget is the Marlboro increase. Again, we're still in litigation with the city of Marlboro, so we do not have a resolution to that as of yet. We've increased the projected Marlboro costs annually. We're proposing a 5% increase this year. To put it in perspective, our projected Marlboro expenses this year are $813,282. The last time we paid Marlboro fully in accordance with our expired IMA was in 2014, and the cost at that time was approximately $456,000. So since 14 to 22, we've nearly doubled the amount our expectation is to pay toward Marlboro. In addition to that, our rate study, which is not reflected in the budgetary documentation, but our rate study includes the expected capital payments to Marlboro for the plant improvements for increased flow capacity and phosphorus removal. So there's a lot of variables associated with Marlboro. Outside of that one increase in the operating budget, and if you exclude the labor and contractual increases, the only other increase is debt. We're realizing debt. The debt is starting to shift for the water meter replacement program from the water enterprise fund over to the sewer enterprise fund. The sewer department uses the water meters to bill the sewer customers based on water use. It's a shared piece of infrastructure, and it's a shared cost for that capital project. When you compare what we show in our operating budget of approximately $2.373 million, when you look at our rate study has that number $500,000 higher. That $500,000 is directly associated with the expected capital budget costs with the plant upgrade that was done in 2014.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, so in terms of the litigation with Marlboro, what I'll share with you right now is public information. So we've gone through discovery. I've been deposed. We've deposed their folks. All the information gathering is done. At this point in time, the hearing is actually scheduled to take place over April, in the month of April. And so we'll get resolution. The three big issues that are at issue here are the town of Northborough's allotted capacity in that treatment plant. We've had a certain capacity allotment, and there's a dispute over what that would be in the future. As Scott says, we've paid to build that plant and to upgrade it at least twice. The most recent upgrade, the city of Marlboro did not want us to participate and pay for a share of the upgrade. So there's an ownership and equity right issue there that we want to make sure that we maintain. And then lastly, Marlboro decided they don't want us to participate in the last capital improvement. They just want to charge us a fee, and the fee they want to charge us, in our opinion, isn't a lawful fee. It's triple what we were paying before, and we don't believe that there's any mathematical operative basis for that fee. So that's the major issue right now, is just what fee are we going to be paying moving forward. So those items are subject to this Superior Court case, and we'll see how that plays out. We have, as Scott said, made provisions for reasonable amounts that we would need to pay once the agreement is settled. There'll be some back payment that Northborough would need to make, and we've planned for that in the operating budget. But right now, we're not going to have much else until, or know where we're going until this litigation completes. And the hearing is in April. We may not have a decision, or we won't have a decision for many, many months after that. So, so that's kind of where things stand. I did send the committee our expert witnesses affidavit, which I think very clearly and concisely, in a matter of 3 or 4 pages, summarizes the town's issue and position. So you have received that. I sent it to you about a month ago, maybe. If anybody'd like another copy, I'm happy to send it. But that's really the back book cover summary of kind of what the issues are, where we're at, and unfortunately, we've tried to negotiate a reasonable solution to this, and we've been unable to do that. So we'll let the court mediate it for us, and then we'll see where we are on the other side. But at least in this budget, it's just a typical increase. And as far as a rate increase in fiscal 2022, Scott, did you have a sense of where we are on that?
Yes, we've gone through a lot of several substantial rate increases in the sewer division over the past 8 or 10 years. To account for Marlboro's increased use charges. There is going to be a 5 to 6% rate increase on the water side. this year, and our projection right now is to hold the sewer rates flat. So have no rate increase for this coming fiscal year on the sewer side to provide a little bit of relief to the community.
Right.
Is this COVID closure of the courts, has that slowed down this process of trying to settle this dispute, or has that had, that's just a side that hasn't really made this thing drag out? It's just more still fighting back and forth between the towns.
Well, it's anybody that's been involved in a legal dispute knows. I always love when you see on TV when people say, "I'll see you in court," as if it's going to happen next week and be resolved the week after. The process of discovery and the process of depositions and interrogatories, that stuff takes months and months, a year. We're through all of that, and yeah, the court. COVID did shut everything down and nothing happened for many months. And it definitely caused a backlog, which has had an impact. But, it was, we weren't blazing a trail to begin with, but COVID and the at least in the last year, that has been part of a contributing factor, I would say.
So do we have any questions or comments on, yes, Janice?
This is a question for John. What's going on with the Heitzman property, which, if I recall correctly, we bought because we expected the EPA to define a new method of, I don't know what it was, percolation or something. Hasn't happened. Are we going to continue to own that, or what?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you remember, 2004, the property became available through 61A, town had right of first refusal. That property, the Heitzman property, abuts the town's original property that we were going to build our treatment plant on Boundary Street, when the state, at the time it was Department of Public Health, forced us to go into Marlboro's Westerly treatment plant. So we were prepared to build our own. So we have land directly across the street from Marlboro's treatment plant. That's where we're going to build it. The Heitzman property directly abuts and is connected to that parcel that we own on Boundary Street. And there's a portion of the Heitzman property. It used to be the Heitzman farm. That's why it's referred to as the Heitzman property. But there's a portion there that has perfect soil conditions for subsurface disposal. And so at the time we purchased the property, the thought was that the EPA, they didn't want any more discharge to the Assabet River. And so in order to get additional capacity at that plant, one option was to go with subsurface disposal. So the town has, 90 days or 120 days, I think it's 90 or 120 days, right of first refusal. We held a special town meeting. We bought the land so that we could have that as an option if it made sense. Now, since then, we've done studies and looked at the feasibility of going subsurface. Now, it is technically feasible, but very, very expensive, significantly more expensive than just treating the water and putting it in the Assabet River. Now, the EPA they're very concerned about interbasin transfers and issues of that nature. We looked at this further, and we believe, based on the hydrology in the area, that essentially if you go subsurface, it's going to make its way through the ground and basically go into the Assabet River anyway. So we have that property. We still own it. We have not done anything with it, Janice, because until we get resolution on this issue with Marlboro, at one point, Marlboro had the position that they wanted us out of the plant. And they wanted us to build our own plant because they wanted the capacity that they had, because the EPA would not give them the additional capacity that they were looking for economic development. They wanted to take our capacity and tell us, go build your own plant. So everything's been up in the air for a number of years now. So we have sat on that property and we haven't made any decisions. I imagine, and Scott and I just had this conversation last week, that when this court case makes its way through, if we get resolution, and let's just say, for sake of argument, we're able to enter into another 20-year intermunicipal agreement for treatment, then that would be the appropriate time to talk about surplusing the property. But keep in mind, the town bought the property, but it wasn't the general taxpayer that bought the property. The enterprise fund bought it and is paying off the debt. So if at some point that property gets sold, then those revenues go back to the enterprise fund and would directly or indirectly, reduce the rates that that users are paying, or stabilize the rates to prevent future rate increases. But the revenues would go back to, to the enterprise fund. So we're still paying off that property. We don't own it in the clear yet, but we're not really in a position to surplus it because we've got to see this. We've got to see this situation through.
John, as I recall, the treatment plants at that time the Marlboro was built were heavily supported by federal funding. And God knows there isn't any of that now, though maybe things will improve. But we were supposed to go in and be a partial owner. And whoever went as our representative was not a good negotiator, and we ended up as a tenant.
You know, it's interesting. We are the ownership structure. I would have clearly negotiated a very different, but the fact remains that we paid for 30% of the original construction, and we paid for 30% of the upgrade that took place about in the 80s or early 90s. And then it's only in this last round where Marlboro upgraded the plant that they refused to allow us to pay our 30%. And that's what kind of put the whole ownership stake question out there. And that's one of the things that, you know, we're looking to have resolved through the court case.
Janice, you bring up a good point in that the federal government, the EPA, has permitting jurisdiction over surface water discharges. So the Westerly treatment plant discharges to a surface water, the Aspet River. The discharge is regulated by the EPA on the federal level. Groundwater discharges are not federally regulated. They're regulated at the state level. So it's a different regulatory authority. It's a different set of rules. It's a different pocketbook you pull out of. It's quite a bit different, and there's a lot of communities, especially down the Cape and the South Coast of Massachusetts, that are doing they're removing their surface water discharges due to shellfish issues, and they're going to groundwater, and they're eliminating their EPA oversight, and they're now regulated by DEP. So it's a more of a local treatment than the federal government. So
Good
benefit to the Heisman property.
Yeah, so we'll hold on to the property until we know what we're doing and the direction we're going in. Just, you know, again, this is sort of a tricky conversation because this is ongoing litigation and we're streaming out live. But again, I haven't disclosed anything that isn't public information at this point. I would just say for the committee's understanding, I believe it's in the best interest of both communities for us to continue to work together on the Westerly treatment plant and to come to a resolution on a reasonable fee. And there's ample methodology for determining that. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our ratepayers to make sure that we're not overpaying our fair share of the operations at that plant. And that's really all we want to do. At the end of the day, we will and want to pay our fair share of the expenses at that plant. We just don't want to overpay. And that's really the crux of the issue at the moment.
Tony, did you have something? You're muted, Tony.
Yep, thanks. Just wanted to, the usual question that's it's always addressed for the people at town meeting is these are enterprise funds, and the question is, of these looks like about $5.3 million. Does any of that come out of the
General taxes? No,
Right.
it is not. Our enterprise funds are fully supported by user fees, and they are not paid or subsidized by general taxes in any way. And the reason for that is that not everybody has sewer. Only about 30% of the town is sewer, and about 80% of the town has water. So if you don't use water, or you don't use sewer, or have those utilities available to you, you don't pay for them. And that's why you set up an enterprise fund.
Thank you.
Yes, any other comments or questions? John, did you have any closing arguments or?
Closing arguments. I do feel like I'm in court after talking about the litigation. Yeah, I've got a few things I'd like to get off my chest, Rick, if you have a moment. No, I just want to say, Scott, again, we're blessed in this town with really excellent, dedicated staff. Scott does a fantastic job on this stuff. He is on top of the rate study and the data. And that's why when you get an unexpected hiccup like what we experienced with the MWRA, he's able to pivot. He's got the information at his fingertips and work out a plan and bring it back to you, something that's reasonable and hopefully something that you'll feel comfortable supporting going to town meeting. So I just want to thank Scott publicly for the work that he's done on this. And our enterprise funds are in actually very good shape. Much more solid footing, I think, than they were when I first came here, because similar to our roadways and our infrastructure, I think some of that stuff was neglected. And now that it's part of the overall planning, the pipe replacements, the meter replacements, the acid tank rehabilitation, the SCADA system that's going to town meeting, these are all investments in the infrastructure and the management that need to happen on an ongoing basis. And you want to smooth the impacts to the rates by making these things on a regular, consistent basis, not neglecting them, and then all of a sudden you have to spend millions of dollars and spike your rates. So I think Scott's done a very reasonable job of smoothing out the impacts of the needed capital projects and presenting a very sustainable rate model moving forward. So I just want to acknowledge that to the committee. Those are my closing arguments, Mr. Judge. Your
Scott,
Honor.
did you have any final words, Scott?
I just want to thank you guys for entertaining me, and Janice, thank you for entertaining me tonight. You're gonna get to see me again. We get to talk solid waste and recycling. So it's a 3 for Public Works this year, and looking forward to coming back on April Fool's Day.
Well, thank you, Scott. And we as with the others, we appreciate your work, and I think we've come a long way since you've been director, and a very smooth and well-running organization.
Thank you. I'll come up with a heartfelt antidote for solid waste somehow.
All right. So hearing no other comments or questions on our agenda, our next meeting date will be on March 22nd, and that will be a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen.
Yep, and just that is the public hearing. So there'll be the presentation, the overall budget, and I'll include everything, including we now have our final asset assessment. You saw when you met with the superintendent at one of your just prior meetings, those assessments are locked up. So on the 22nd, we'll do the overall presentation of the budget, and it is a public hearing. So if anybody would like to participate and provide their comments to the committee and to the Board of Selectmen, those comments are welcome. That's the purpose of this hearing. So it is a mandatory performance by the committee. So please make sure you're in attendance, and you don't have to make any decisions that night. It's just to hear the full information and to listen to public comment.
All right, so since our meeting is, the agenda is thoroughly finished, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Janice Height has made a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Tony has seconded the motion. I'll take a roll call. All in favor, please say aye. George Brinkle.
Aye.
Bob D'Amico.
Aye.
Janice Height.
Aye.
Anthony Petit.
Aye.
And myself as acting chair, Rick Niebuhr. Aye. We have a unanimous vote to adjourn the meeting. I now state this meeting is closed, and all you may adjourn and